Welcome to Conversation with Buddy. I'm your host, Buddy Puckett. Well, we do these podcasts every Friday morning, and the goal is to hopefully inspire you and encourage you. And we are in March of 2025. Time is just flying by. And I'm kind of excited for summertime, and hopefully you guys are as well. Today, I just want to talk to you about Romans Road. If you've not heard of Romans Road, it's in the book of Romans. It's got several verses to it, but basically it talks about man's condition. So I'm going to read a couple verses to start out with, and then we're going to introduce our podcast guest. And at the end, I'm going to tie it in with the other couple verses that go to Romans Road. So there's 4 or 5 verses in Romans that talk about the gospel. So here's a couple verses right now. Number 1, Romans 3:23, it says, "For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God." So that's the state of man before Christ. The second verse is Romans 6:23. It says, "For the wages of sin is death, but the free gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord." And what does that mean? Well, after the podcast, at the tail end, I'm going to bring in a couple more verses and help you learn Romans Road. It'll tie it all in. You'll understand the gospel. And if you're not saved, hopefully you will be. So, well, without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest today. His name is Arjay Mendiola. Welcome, Arjay.
Hey, thank you, buddy, for having me on. Super excited.
Well, dude, X marks the spot, man.
Yes, sir. X marks the spot.
So I like that shirt.
Thank you. Yeah, it's one of the ones we just dropped. So we've got a couple more things coming. We started with the black, and now we've got white.
Right on, dude. Well, hey, we're going to dive in deep. I'll do just a little introduction, but really I want you to unpack your story, because you and I met. I think Rick Saffels introduced us.
Yeah.
You didn't even really know Rick.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I met him like one time.
One time, you and I met for coffee, had a great connection and good fellowship. And I love it. And you're 24.
Yeah.
So you're a young guy. I'm like double your age, right? Actually, I'm more than double your age. That means I'm old.
You're just wiser.
Let's hope I'm wiser. My wife might question that, but hey, that keeps me humble.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Let me just do a quick introduction. Just things we're going to talk about, but I really want you to be the one who unpacks your story. So, you're adopted. How old were you when you were adopted?
I was adopted as I was born.
At birth. Okay.
Yep, straight at birth.
So we're going to talk about adoption and identity. We're going to talk about track and field impact on your life, because you were in track and field.
Yeah.
And what'd you do?
Yeah, so I kind of did a little bit of everything. I started off with just the 100 meter, 200 in middle school. And then I got to the high school level, and they're like, you're doing the 1, the 2, the relays, the jumps.
So you're fast.
Yeah, well, used to be.
You're fast, dude. Yeah. That's awesome, dude. Your view of God growing up in the church, so that was, being younger. And then after you got saved. So I can't wait to have you unpack that. Overcoming self-harm, the lead up to your current career. You're now in real estate.
Yeah.
Right? Well, you own a business.
Yeah.
And you do real estate. We're going to talk about that. And then how COVID changed everything for you. So,
yeah,
dude, let's dive in. So talk to me, where'd you grow up?
Yeah.
And just the beginning years of your life, how your adopted parents impacted you, siblings, life, church, the whole deal. So
awesome. Yeah. Well, you gotta go a little bit farther back before my birth, actually. So my birth mom, my dad actually was in the Air Force early and before I was born. And so they had moved around a lot. And at this time they had been on the East Coast, and they had met this family who they also adopted a girl. And so they were a part of their church, and this girl was growing up in their youth group. And that girl actually was my birth mom. And so they were pretty close with my birth mom growing up. And she got pregnant really young, like 17. So she just wasn't fit to be a parent. And so they had done a private adoption. My parents, actually, funny enough, were already signed papers to adopt another child across the country. Yeah. And it's God's timing and everything. Night before, everything fell through for that. And they were like, well, we still want to adopt. And then the next day, my birth mom called and said, hey, I'm having a kid. I need an adoption. And so that's kind of how they met my birth mom. But I was born in Newport News, Virginia, all the way on the East Coast.
Wow. Yeah, you're a little ways from home, man.
Yeah. But I was only there for like a week. I've never even been back since, which is crazy. It's
you have
on
any
my
goals
list
of going back to see where...
Yeah.
You're born. Okay.
100%. I've got a list. I made it to New York, so I got a little close this last year.
Yeah.
But so once I was born, we still moved around a couple more times. My dad hadn't left the Air Force yet. We were in New Mexico, we were in Washington, and then and when we were in New Mexico, my little brother got born. He's 2 years younger than me, and he was like a surprise. Like they were hoping I was the last one, and then here he comes along. And so I have in total on the adopted side have 3 brothers. My 2 older brothers are 13 and 15 years older than me, so they were already almost adults by the time I was born. So that relationship kind of impacted me a bit, just because when you have that big of an age gap, you don't really get to know those siblings. And my brother that was 13 years older than me, when he turned 18, he left for the military.
He's gone, yeah.
So it was only like 4 years I really remember growing up with him.
And are you close today? I mean, do you...
Not really. Unfortunately, no. It's crazy enough. The hardest relationship I had was with my younger brother, but now we have the closest relationship out of all my siblings.
But it's the reason why it was hard is because you lived with him.
Yeah.
I mean, family's family. We love family, but, but it's still, if your older brothers don't live with you, well, there's no problems because you don't see them. Yeah,
exactly. And they kind of just started their own lives and were out doing their thing. And one of them lives here now in Salem. When he was in the military, he was all over. He was mainly in San Diego. And then we got letters and stuff from him, and it was hard to like worry when it's like you haven't really kind of had that relationship.
Right.
But we always saw him as like our hero, like he's in the military fighting, and so it's like that's the image I had in my head of like who my brothers were. Yeah. But I would say so like that's that side. But then on my biological side, and this, I found out a lot of this information like way later. So I have 3 more siblings on my biological side, and one of them was born like a year and a half after. So my birth mom, when I found that out, I was like, so my birth mom gave me up because she wasn't ready, but then she had another kid like right after me, and she kept all 3 of those kids. And so I kind of just was like struggling with that for a while of like, why me? Like, what's so wrong with me that, And so that was something I grew up struggling with, especially just not having answers. She wasn't like, now that I'm an adult and have a better understanding, I understand that she wasn't in the frame of mind to take care of kids at all by any means, especially hearing like their testimonies. It's good that I got adopted because I feel like I'm the only one that like made it out unscathed in a sense from the adoption. And so it was just hard, like, growing up because I didn't have any answers. I didn't even know I had siblings until I was, like, in middle school. I was like, I have siblings that are my blood, like, flesh. And I've grown up in this adopted household where I felt like I didn't belong at all because you guys all have different ethnicities. And I was never really introduced to my culture growing up at all. So it's like I didn't even know anything. And with me being adopted, my biological father, like, my birth mom said she has no idea who it was. And I was like, okay, like that's fair. Maybe you don't.
Maybe, but
part of me always felt like she did, and she just didn't. Like it was someone she just didn't want to say who it was. But because no one knew, I only knew that I was half Islander. The other half was just a big question mark.
Okay.
For
which island?
Guam.
Guam. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so I knew that, and I was kind of leaning into that. But like when you don't grow up being introduced to your culture, it's kind of like almost like I'm a fake Islander. Like they're like, okay, so what's this? And I'm like, no idea.
Yeah.
And they're like, so you're Islander, but you have no idea about your culture. And so I just was like, oh, well. So I think that just all of that tied into like, you don't understand really about the effects of adoption until later. Cause I think in the beginning, you don't really mind. My parents did a good job when I was elementary, trying not to make sure I felt left out. Like if kids ask like, why are your parents look different than you? They'd be like, well, I'm adopted. That's why.
Yeah.
And so I think they did a good job of that. And it just was like, once you start getting into that identity piece in middle school, high school, you're just like start questioning everything.
Yeah. Identity is a big deal. I mean, even if you grow up in your traditional family, mom and dad, you still deal with identity.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys lived here, and you guys always lived in...
Oh, yeah, I guess I should.
Yeah, talk about where you actually...
Yeah, so we settled down in Mountain Home Air Force Base when I was like, I think I was like 3 years old.
That's Idaho?
Yeah, Idaho.
Okay,
yeah.
got it.
And so it's a little bit... I think it's north of Boise.
Okay.
North or south. I'm directionally challenged.
Yeah.
But we grew up there until I was 9. And so in 2008, when everything crashed, my dad had been working for this company for like, it was like almost, I think like 35 years. Yeah. And so for me, like growing up, seeing that, he was always gone working, like just dedicated. And I think that's where I got my work ethic. But it also, to me, when he got laid off, I was still a kid, but old enough to think about things. And that really was like, well, why would I give 35 years of my life to somewhere that's just going to fire me and let me go and have to uproot my whole family? And so in 2008, when everything crashed, he was out of work. My mom went back to work. So they kind of switched roles for a little. And then the same company offered him a better job over here. But the hard thing was that he'd have to like leave immediately. It wasn't like, we can wait for you to pack up and move, buy a house and all that. And so he moved over here and was here for like a year and a half before we came. So yeah, it was kind of rough. It was, I would say, because my dad was working all the time, I didn't have like a great relationship. So like him being over here, like I missed him, but it wasn't like, it was like out of mind kind of thing. And so we eventually came over here in like 2000, I think it was April 2010.
Okay.
But in Idaho, the school year ends in May.
Okay.
And over here it ends in June. So when we came over here, we were just about finishing up in elementary there, and I just had to take a test and I was done with like the 3rd grade. But then we came over here and they're like, no, there's still like 2 months. You have to re-enroll. So it's like I finished 3rd grade.
But then you had to go again.
I had to go again. And I was just like, this makes no sense.
This is horrible.
Yeah, it was terrible. And so, yeah, we came over in 2010 and we lived off of Center Street over by the Lancaster Mall was where our house was.
Yeah. Interesting. So you're 9 you were 9 or 10?
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. Walk me through kind of those early years. We're going to talk about sports and the good stuff too, but those formative years when you're young, because you said you had a younger brother that lived with you. Yeah. And he was also adopted?
So he wasn't adopted. He was biological.
He was biological after they adopted you. Interesting how that sometimes happens when people can have kids, they adopt, they become foster parents, and then lo and behold, they get pregnant. Is that the story?
I don't even know. I actually didn't realize. I don't think I've ever asked them the story behind that. I know they had me, and they were expecting to be 3 and done. Like I was just going to be kind of like an only child since the other 2 had already left.
That's right.
And then I think later, like in a year after I'd won, they're like, well, we don't want me to be alone. Yeah. So should we adopt another kid? And then they got pregnant.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Where does that brother live now?
He lives here in Salem too.
Okay.
He actually just moved to South Salem. So
are you guys close?
Yeah. So we've been, I would say, since after like COVID-ish, we started like repairing that relationship. I think just because we both now are adults and can talk about some of the things that like happen and stuff like that in a more mature manner. Whereas when we're both teenagers, it's like, I hate you, you hate me, like, and so
you guys fight a lot, like.
Yeah, it was actually really bad, and I think it just had a lot to do with everything that was going on during that time. Yeah. But yeah, I helped him move the first time into his apartment, and now he's moving. And I think he just texted me last night if I was going to bring him some move-in food.
Oh yeah, come on, man.
Yeah.
That's funny. Okay. Talk to me about the whole identity thing.
Yeah.
Kind of grew up in church, so your adopted dad finally moved over from Idaho to Salem. So talk about that transition, him back in your life.
Yeah.
Was that good? Kind of your identity. And then did you guys go to church in Mountain Home?
Yeah. So my dad actually went to like theology university, or I'm not sure if it's theology college. Whatever.
Yeah.
And so the way he took the Bible was that it was very like truth. Like there was I would say there was not no compassion, but I feel like there's a lot of lack of the love piece. Yeah. That is the whole entire piece of why Jesus came. And so for him, he was in the church preaching. He was doing everything. He was on the leadership team. And so I was always there at the church watching him do these things and listening to what he was saying and stuff. And I think as a kid, you don't really like understand all of it. You're kind of just there like, oh, I'm at the church 4 days a week because my dad has all this stuff going on.
Right.
And so I think the church was a big part of our life in Idaho. We went to all the events, all the cookouts, all the camping trips. And so a lot of my friends I grew up with were in the church. And then when he moved over here, we tried out a couple churches, and then we landed over at Grace Community, which is across the street from Shemeketa.
Yeah.
And so
Pastor Dave, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, Pastor Dave. Yeah.
I know Pastor Dave.
That's
good
awesome.
Guy.
Yeah, he is. I think he's still pastoring over there now too.
Maybe, yeah.
But so my dad, we landed at that church, and we didn't really get involved immediately. I know it was kind of just like touch and go for a little while. Okay. And when we finally moved over here, it's crazy because like as I've been doing the X, learning about, what the pain is and turning into power, some of the things, it's like made me think back on events that have happened and be like, wait, hold on, that's not actually okay. That's not right. And so when we first moved over here, I noticed so my dad lived in an apartment with his friend in Tualatin.
Right.
And we were originally going to be moving to Tualatin, but it just was like too expensive. And my dad was like, it's a commute from Salem. Like I've already commuted from Mountain Home to Boise. So it's like the same distance.
Not doing that.
Yeah. And so I remember one night we were just in the apartment, all of us, like we didn't have a hotel, and I think he was supposed to get a hotel and he didn't. And my mom was just like so mad. She's like, where are we going to sleep? You're sharing in a 2-bedroom apartment with your friend that works. There's no room for us. And it just was like, it felt weird because we hadn't seen him in so long, and it just really felt off. And I don't know if it was, maybe there's just like a lot of tension in the air. Like, you guys are coming back into my life. Maybe he wasn't enjoying his life without us, and maybe he didn't want us,
Yeah.
But it was just like, I remember those first couple months it was like almost like reacclimating to a stranger.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do out here? Like, what's your routine? And like, well, we have our routine. We're trying to do our thing. And so my mom tried to take us out like into the community a lot, take us to the mall, do stuff like that. But I think the biggest difference was in Idaho, he was home sometimes by the time like 6 p.m. It was dinner time. But when we moved over here, I think he wouldn't come home till like 8 or 9 sometimes. And it'd just be like, he would leave at like 5 a.m. So it's like, wow. I just didn't see my dad for like a very long time until it was like the weekend. And it was like, Sunday we'll go to church. Okay. And so that was rough. And I think that kind of was one of the first like notches in the ladder to the broken relationship, because it just was like, we were hoping, excited to come see our dad again. It just was like, he was gone.
He was gone. Yeah. Interesting. Lots of, we talk, we do Valor mentoring here. We talk a lot about father fractures, and we all have one. No matter how good or bad your dad was, I have a great dad. And, it's not perfect though.
Yeah.
And so we all have a father fracture. I'm a dad to 2 daughters, just a little bit older than you. And, I try to be a good dad, but I'm still a dude.
Yeah.
Right. Still got my flesh I'm dealing with. So, well, it's good to unpack this, because there are a lot of people out there who probably can relate to what you're saying. You're adopted, not quite fitting in, kind of weird. Did my mom and dad reject me? And, as you grew up, how did I want to get to the point where you actually figure that out. Not that you don't think about it, but you're okay with it. You've acknowledged it. God's got you. But there's definitely a journey getting there. Like, it wasn't easy. So talk about that journey, going to church, and then we're going to get into COVID, because I know some stuff happened there as well.
Yeah. So going into church, like, I knew... See, I was never, growing up, I never really fit the social role I was supposed to. Like, I played with the other toys, I did the other things, and it just, for me, that was comfortable. Like, I was cool with that. And so growing up in the church, when you start understanding, like, which way is the truth and the life of, like, no, like, doing these things are a sin. Being this type of person is a sin. It's like, you're going to hell, you're doomed. And so for me, at the back of my mind, that was always there. And I rejected like these feelings of identity of like, well, I like hanging out more with the boys. I like doing things like that more. But also the Bible is telling me, no, you can't do that. And so I just was like always wrestling with that, with on top of that, the identity of being adopted. And so growing up in the church, I just feel like I never belonged anywhere. And so growing in middle school is when I really started noticing difference. I mean, in middle school, everyone's trying to figure out who they are and stuff. And so in middle school, I got bullied a lot because I think that was the first time my parents would let me pick what I wanted to wear to school. It wasn't like, okay, here, you're going to wear this. And so I just started wearing more like boy clothes and more just casual stuff. And people would make fun of me and they'd just be like, why don't you dress more preppy? Why don't you do these things? I'm like, because it's not comfortable for me. That's not what I like. And so that identity of understanding, like, dude, I don't know, like the whole world, society is telling me to do something else, even my own parents, but like it doesn't feel like that's who I am. And so coming out of middle school, I was just identifying as like, I'm just gay. Like I like females. I'm a female. That's it. That's period. But I have Jesus in my life. So I just was conflicted. Like, do I even get to know who Jesus is because of this sin? And so going to middle school or high school, I had that and was just like struggling with that heavily. And it was getting worse with it being my teen years. I feel like I had more freedoms of choice, but I also felt so restricted at home. Like, okay, if that's who you're going to choose to be during the day, well, on the weekends and when you're here, we're going to sit on the table for 4 hours. You're going to read the Bible. You're going to tell me, what does it say? You're going to recite it to me and tell me that you're revoking that sin and all that stuff. And it was just like, it was brutal because I was like, this doesn't feel like what I feel like God should be. And so during all that, I honestly stepped away from the church sometimes, was like, if this is God, I don't want it. Because I was told he's full of love and this is not love. This hurts.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I was just going to say, when do you think you accepted Christ? Were you younger? Did you know him personally, or did you know about him?
Yeah.
Or really the faith piece came later? Tell me about that.
Yeah, the faith piece came way later. I'd say I really gave myself to Christ, and it was December of 2021.
No, so really?
Yeah.
3 years ago. Roughly.
3 years ago.
Yeah.
I always would say, I feel like I was a lukewarm Christian for a long time before that. I was like, well, I grew up in the church. I'm saved. Like, it doesn't matter what I do. I'm saved. I go to church. Yeah. Good enough. Like, and if that's not good enough, then I don't know what else is.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel like it just was crazy because like I had track, I was identifying with track, and I would pray to God every time before all my meets.
No kidding.
And
you're a praying guy. You did have faith and belief. Maybe at home it didn't feel like love, but you knew somehow, some way. Yeah,
I knew there was a higher power. So I would say like I never was like, no, there's no God. I knew that there was a higher power. In my mind, the way I kind of like was deciding that was like, I'd rather serve a God and be wrong than to not serve a God and be wrong. And so I was like, you know what, like I can pray, like these are important meets, but I would only pray for the big things. And that's what I think. I didn't really understand really who Christ was. I never really got that super close connection until after COVID. And so, but I was winning all these big meets. I was getting state championships. And so I was like, well, there is a God. I'm praying and I'm winning. So like, there's a God. And I think I just wrapped my identity around that because I was struggling with everything else in high school. I was like, dude, I'm a winner. And if you're not with me, you're a loser. And it was just like, finally, I felt like after everything I'd been through, I was on top. And I was like, don't even like talk to me. You don't understand what I've been through. But then COVID happened. And so I graduated high school, got a scholarship, and was going to a Division I college. And when COVID happened, because of all the freshmen were new, they kind of were just like already talk of like, well, we need to prioritize the seniors. What are we going to do with the freshmen? And so there was already talk of that. And then being on campus, it was my first time like away from home, like officially. Yeah. And I got into a fist fight actually with somebody else. In college, because we were the only two so I hadn't come out as trans yet, and I was still running as the female team. I wasn't taking any hormones or anything, so that was all good. But this other girl, we were the only two.
So pause real quick.
Yeah.
So during those high school years, you were identifying as a girl, right? Did you dress as a girl as well?
So no, not entirely. I dressed just as much as a boy as any other middle high school guy.
But you did try out for the girls' track team. And,
So during my high school time, that was before all the legalization of gay rights and stuff. And for me, I thought there was just something wrong with me. I was like, well, I can't be trans. That's not a thing. I've never really heard of any of that. I was like, I'm just different. I just like wearing guy clothes. And so I never even considered that at all in high school. And so with that, I was like, well, I am a female. Like, I know biologically what I am. I'm not going to say I'm not biologically this. And so I ran with the females, and I was still identify as a female. And it was interesting because, you know, like, I have all my friends that are guys, and I didn't quite fit in it with them because it's like, you're not really a guy. But then the girls, it was like, I don't do the things you guys do.
Right.
So
you're stuck somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle. And with all the rights haven't passed yet, there wasn't talk of that. It just was like, I just really don't want to be here. I feel like a sore thumb. And it just was like, I feel like a mountain of that loss of identity. And so coming out of high school and starting to, it got really, I would say in my junior year of high school, my parents and me it was bad. It was the worst probably time of my life. So my sophomore year, I got diagnosed with bipolar and depression. And there might've been some misdiagnosis in there, but first thing they did was fill like 3 pill bottles and be like, take these meds, you'll be fine. And I was like, I don't want to take pills. Like, is there something wrong with me? Like, and nobody would give me like a straight answer of like, no, nothing's wrong with you. You're just different, you know? And it's just like the way they would say those things. It was like, I don't want to take these pills. And so my parents were like, you have to, otherwise like it's going to like get bad. So I started taking all these pills, and it really messed up my mental health so bad. Like, all of the anxiety and feelings I already had were bad, but this just like made it 10 times worse. And so that was my sophomore year. My junior year rolls around, and I just was like so much angst, so much anger. Like, I could not control my emotions at all. I just feel like it was so imbalanced. And I know at one point my parents, we just got into a big fight about my identity. They were like, okay, you need to make a choice. You're going to be an adult soon. You're either going to be with Christ or you're going to hell, and you're not going to have him in your life. And I was like, how are you going to like tell me that? You're my parents. You're supposed to love me no matter what, you know? And so I would run away a few times, and I went and lived with my youth pastor for like last part of my junior year. I was staying with them, and I just was like, I am so displaced. And this was in the middle of track season too. And so I actually dropped out, was like, I'm not going to school anymore. I can't do this. Just send me to Job Corps, send me anywhere but here. And I just was like, that was the first time I was like, God, like, where are you? Because like, I've been praying for you. You've helped me win these championships, but like, where are you? And I think I just kind of left it at that. I never really waited around for an answer, and kind of was just like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take things into my own hands. Like, I don't need him, I guess, because he's not here. All this crazy stuff's going on. If he really was my God, like, wouldn't he stop me from all these things? And so that, I think, is what set really the chain fire of like crazy events. And so at the time, I started smoking marijuana when I was a sophomore. One of my friends introduced me to it, and I just was hooked on that and doing that all throughout high school. And it was the only thing at the time that would give me peace. And so I was just like, well, this is it. Like, I'm just going to have this. I don't need this in my life. And like, as soon as you cut God out of your life, your life does not get any better. And so
you're going to smoke a lot more weed, because does it bring you peace, or does it just numb your pain?
Yeah.
I mean, I get that it felt like peace. But I get the whole numbing effect too, having been down that road before.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. And it was just numbing. That is like perfect description. I just felt so numb. And so I left, it was my junior year, and I was an avid, and so your avid teacher stays with you for 4 years, and pretty much.
What's avid?
Yeah, so it's advanced via individial determination, and
So you were smart, man. You were driven. You had a lot going for you.
Yeah, I would say, yeah.
You didn't see it, but
I just didn't see it.
Yeah. Well, we often don't.
Yeah.
Well, Satan is working double time on a kid like you to influence you that you're not worthy.
Yeah.
Heck, he does it to all of us. I'm not worthy sometimes, but Christ says I am.
Yeah.
Christ says you are.
Yeah.
And so.
Exactly. And so my teacher really just was like, I was leaning on my teacher staff because I didn't have parents who were in the picture that were going to support me. They were just like, I don't even know. You're not my child. And so
it felt rejection when they should be loving you.
Yeah.
And I'm not a parent that has gone through this. Anyway, we have kids, we're going to have different problems.
Yeah.
So I can't speak for them because I don't know that, but I mean, they want you to be saved, but the one way to get you to be saved is to love you unconditionally and lead you to Jesus. Sometimes we, as parents or Bible believers, become legalistic and we leave out love.
Yeah.
And that's the key ingredient. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Because I look back on all of the teacher relationships I had and support that I had, and all of them, I would say I didn't even know they were believers till after, but I could feel it because of just how they took me under their wing and were like, you didn't eat today? Okay, well, I have this oatmeal I can give you. Like, I really think like I got through high school with the staff that took care of me. Like my athletic trainer that was there, she would show up early and bring an extra oatmeal. Like she would make her own oatmeal, like pre-meals, and she would make an extra one for me because she knew I wouldn't eat in the morning.
Dude, that's love,
Yeah.
Feeding, Jesus said, I never knew you. Well, how did I not know you? Well, you didn't feed my people. And I mean, feed physically and also spiritually. I mean, somebody's feeding you food, but they're doing it through love. That is the spiritual aspect of feeding you. And I bet those people did know the impact they were having on your life. And I think we often walk around, we're loving on people. We're doing what Jesus asked us to do. But yeah, we're like, do I even matter? Do I even make an impact? The fact that you're talking about the story should help encourage people out there that your actions matter.
Yeah.
People remember. I hear stories like this all the time. Like, people remember the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And if we're loving on people, people are going to remember that. You'll make an impact in their life.
Yeah.
So it sounds like happened to you.
Yeah, exactly. And I still look back, and it's crazy now, like, now that I'm getting involved in the community, it's like full circle that I know a lot of them, maybe they did that and they didn't see the impact, but now I'm on a train of good things that are coming that it just like comes back to them. Like I can serve them now for serving me. Yeah. And so, yeah, I was coming into my senior year, and that avid teacher really just was like, look, if you continue this way, you're not going to graduate. And I know maybe that's not important to you, but I want you to know, like, it is important. Just get to graduation. I don't care what happens after. If you want to go down this path after, that's fine, but at least get to graduation. Come on. And she really just like was like, you're going to stay after school with me. We're going to do this. We're going to show up early. You're going to stay in for lunch, and just really kind of relit that fire. And so I think I had like a month left of school, and I went back to school my junior year right at the end. And I just was like, I have to like get my grades into good standing. And so I think go ahead.
Pause. So, here you have your parents on one side wanting you to walk a certain road, but you didn't feel very good about that. Then you have a teacher saying, hey, I want you to walk a certain road, and you felt differently. Can you kind of unpack what that feeling is? What is that? Because they both said the same thing. How do we feel differently on those?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really deep down, you know what you want. And even if you're outwardly saying like, no, this isn't what I want, you know what you want on the inside. And so when that person who is talking to you about the thing that you really do want, it almost it's like this, it's the spirit, like God speaking to you of like, when you go to church and you're just talking about a lesson and it just like convicts you. You're like, oh, he's talking to me. And I feel like that's where, when I felt like my teachers were talking to me, not just me as a being here, but it's like they were talking to my soul of like, look, like I see you. I want you to be successful. I want you to be, because inside I wanted to be successful. I wanted to be, that's what I always wanted at the end, but it's just, there was like a pile of crap on top of all of that. So it was like my parents, I feel like they never spoke those words of like, we want success for you. They just would say like, we want you to be in line.
Would you say, because what you said was you felt like the teacher was talking to your soul. Dude, those are deep words. Do you feel judged by your parents in any way? Is this part of the rebellion or the problem? Is like you didn't feel loved, but you felt judged?
Yeah.
Is that maybe a different way of looking at it?
Yeah. And, I've tried to consider things back, like, and really unpack. For a long time, I let those high school years just in a file folder away. I was like, I don't even want to go back there. But in September, when me and Dylan, my business partner, started some things, I realized that the only way to progress in life is to let go of forgiveness. And I just had to be like, you know what, this is painful, but I've got to let go. Otherwise, I'm not going to get where I want to go. And so I forgave my parents. We had that conversation.
You did?
Yeah, and really just was like, look, I called them, was like, I don't need you to talk. I just need you to listen to everything I have to say. And I actually don't care about your opinion. So at the end of this, like, whatever you think you're going to say to convince me is not going to work, because I've already made up my mind and I have Christ in my life. And so I think just when my teacher was speaking to my soul, it was just really like, I see this for you. And when my parents were talking to me, it was more of like, we see this for us, because my dad was, and this was something I realized later, was like, my dad was on the leadership team. My dad was involved in church. And if your child is doing something that's against, let's say, the church, like, how many conversations did people have with him saying, hey, you're going to have to leave if you don't get your kid in line. You're going to have to. Right. And it's like, at that point, like, do you tell your kid, like, hey, your actions are actually hurting the entire family? Like, you wouldn't say that. Yeah. And so I look back and I'm like, I think maybe they just were protecting me, and I didn't really see it then. Yeah. But it was that maybe they were up against some fire. Because, I mean, the devil comes after all of us. Yeah. And so it's like, how many thoughts and pressure was on them to get me in line, and it was just coming off the wrong way.
So you're considered a PK, a pastor's kid, because your dad was a pastor for a while. And is it, sometimes, we go to church, we look good on Sunday, but then we live like hell Monday through Saturday, or we live more fleshly. We show up in our Sunday best, on Sunday. So I'm curious, how do we, and I look at like Luke chapter 15, the prodigal son. Do you know that story at all?
A little bit, yeah.
It's a really good story. Heck, I'm a prodigal son. You know the truth. You don't want it. You want to go your own way and do your own thing. And so the prodigal son, he asked for his father's inheritance. Give it to me now. And it's really a picture of God and us, or God in Israel, Israelites. But really, from dad to son, the son goes, I want my inheritance, give it to me. The father gives it to him, and he goes off and he squanders it all. Then he figures out that the pigs that he's been feeding are eating better than he is. And so he's like, and that's the point of humility. That's why I always tell my girls, I love pain. Yeah. Pain's a wonderful teacher. Success never teaches you what pain can. So the son comes back, I don't know how much longer later, maybe years later. And when he gets to the end of the road, his father sees him and runs to him. So the prodigal son, you and I have been one. There's a verse in Proverbs that says, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they get old, they won't depart from it. You and I are prodigal sons, whether your parents did it right or wrong. The facts are they delivered truth to you, right? Sometimes delivery does help, but the facts are that they actually did the delivery. And hey, we're going to read scripture. Go. And so, but good for you that you can own whatever it is. Whatever happened is in the past. We're going to forgive, and we're going to move forward. You may not forget, but we can move forward. Yeah. It's the only way.
100%. Yeah. And I think part of the promise I made to God was that it just was like, I'm going to walk in his light and actually listen to him, because I wasn't listening to him for so long. And it was like, how'd that work out for you? It was like, okay, so now your other option is to listen to me, and it could actually be good. And so I think like as I was departing out of college and COVID happened, and I just was like, what had once been my identity of track and field, like I was like, I'm a state champion, and like I was humble at times, but there were times where it was like, dude, like I made it my Instagram handle, like it was my identity. Like I identified as the state champion, and it wasn't just I won these state champions. It's like I am a state champion. And so it was, I basically was building my own altar around myself.
Yeah.
And when COVID happened, and the talk of that, and I got in that fight, I was like, you know what, I just want to go home. Like I don't even care anymore about track. And that kind of struck me, because when I had said that, I was like, dude, I felt like it was like the devil, like basically like, what do you mean you don't care anymore? Like this, don't you want this? Like you're going to be rich. You're going to have everything. This is the easy way. All you got to do, just come stay, you know? But I was going to parties too on the university.
What college were you at?
Montana State.
Montana State.
Yeah.
Is that D1?
Yeah, it's Division One. Yeah. Okay. So I'm on my way out of high school. I had won 5 state championships, and I had a full ride offer to go Division One. And I should have taken more tours, but you know, the ego in me was like, no, I'm going D1. Give me the scholarship. I'll take it. And so I took the scholarship, went out there, and I started going to parties. I was doing stuff that I was like, this isn't even me. Like I regret this, and I've learned from it, but not my girlfriend now, but my girlfriend back then. Like I ended up having some like infidelity over there. And I just was like, I literally turned to this person that I did not know. And that I think is what told me of like, okay, I don't need, track's not my identity, bro. Like this is destroying you. Like, do you want to keep being destroyed, or do you just want to, you know, take the humble bullet and quit track and go back home and do something else? And so I decided to go back home, and that was the first time I was like, what am I going to do without track? Like, this was my life for the last 7 years. This is all I'm good at. I scaved through with a 3.0 in high school. I was like, I'm not no genius. I was like, this is the only scholarship I had on the table. And so I was like, okay, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go home. And so I went home, re-enrolled in Shemeketa, and was like, I'll just do the thing. I'll just get school done. I know I want to go to school at least. And it was hard because my dad drove me out there. My uncle lives in Billings. And so I think that's why they really wanted me to go to Montana State, was because my uncle was out there, and they're like, at least like we'll have like a pulse on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And so when I called them and said I was quitting, they were like, you're not quitting.
What year were you when you were quitting?
So I graduated in 2019, and it was fall term. So it was September 2019. So I made it out there in August because I had to go early because of freshman. And so I called my dad he drove me over on his way out he was flying out of the country. Yeah. And so he was flying to Austria, I think, for some work thing. And he wasn't going to come back till the end of September. And so in my mind was like, that's a perfect opportunity. He's going to have to come back and get his truck. He's going to pick me up. And so I called my mom, was like, I'm quitting. I'm coming home.
So you weren't even done with fall term, and like, I'm done.
Yeah, I was like, this is not for me. I hate this. And my mom they were doing everything in their power to convince me, like, are you seriously going to throw your life away? And for me, I thought they would have been like, wow, we're proud of you. You're going to be a bigger person and coming back.
That's right.
And again, it was just like another like knife to the chest of like rejection.
Would you say also disappointment? Like they were just disappointed. Rather go, hey, RJ, we got your back. We love you. You know, tell me why you think quitting is the best option. I want to hear. Yeah. It's okay. Tell me about that. But do you feel like they're just disappointed? Like they had this vision for you, and that you had to live by their vision, not your vision.
Yeah, I think so. And I think like, again, like, you know, being all sinners, we all have something that struggles. And I think their image of who people saw they were was the knife for them. And so I think because they blew me up all over Facebook, we're telling all their friends, and it's like, crap. What are we going to look like when we say, oh, yeah, our kid quit college, you know? And so I think... maybe their identity is in
really their kid, not in Christ.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I think we all do that, by the way. It's not just them.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like, that's the things I've been learning was that, we all have struggles. We all have something that is the thing that either tempts us or pulls us out of God. And I think it really just was the identity. I mean, looking back on like me, how I was growing up in the church and what I was doing as my identity, how could that have reflected onto them? And now this with track of like, well, we don't want to be the bummy parents who our kids drop out and now is doing nothing with life. Like, what does that say about us?
Yeah.
And so they told me I needed to call my youth pastor. And I called my youth pastor and was talking to him. And again, he was like, look, like, I just want you to know, like, we love you. I don't think you should quit because I think this is a great opportunity. But if you feel unsafe, you feel like this isn't what you need, then like you should go home. I know your parents are probably telling you to stay, but at the end of the day, it's like, what is your well-being? Is it going to be out there? Is it going to be home? And then I called my Avid teacher and was like, hey, like, dude, I don't feel safe out here and I want to go home. Like, I don't know. My parents won't listen to me. My youth pastor kind of listened to me. I just need that voice of reason of like, is this dumb? Like, am I really?
Yeah.
And so I feel like I did a good job. I called my support system and
Good for you.
Yeah. And I made up my mind. I was like, you know what? Yeah, this is not for me. And so I came home, went to Chemeketa, was doing that for a little while. And then I realized like, okay, I see my life without track. I love track. Like, I don't want to give that up. I was so good at it. Like, why can't I just do that? I was like, I barely just got home. And so I called one of my old coaches because they knew that I was dropping out too. And they didn't. And it's funny enough because the people who trained me the whole time, they weren't the ones that were like, don't quit. They were like, hey, you do what you got to do. And I called one of them, was like, hey, I actually do want to go to track. I'm not sure what my options are. Maybe I can just come assistant coach. I just don't want to leave the track world.
Right.
And he had said, well, one of my good friends is a track coach for a community college in Portland. Like, I can call him, see if like there's any spots. And then I got another full scholarship to go run at Clackamas Community. And so I was like, I'm back in this thing. I'm good. But that whole time, and I look back on this, is that I didn't pray a single time of what I was going to do. I just was like, I'm just going to do this.
Yeah.
And so then we had one track meet. Things were going good. I was fired up. And then spring break happened and the whole world shut down.
COVID.
Yeah.
Spring of 2020, man.
It was hard because they told us like, hey, so we're not going to have track. Your scholarships are still in effect. You can still finish this year's term, but if COVID is still around in the fall, we're not really going to have any scholarships for next year because it's like, what's the point if there's no sports? So you can finish out the year, you can go home, do whatever you need to do. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to stick out spring term. I'm going to try this. It's just online. Like, how hard could it be? And I didn't realize that, like, at the time, my parents, like, our relationship was already strained. It was not as bad as it was my junior year. It was just more of like, I had roommates. Like, I lived it's a 3-bedroom, 3-bed, 2-bath house. And one of the bedrooms was turned into an office. And so at the time when I came home, my older brother had already moved back in, and he was struggling with alcoholism, like, pretty heavy. Yeah. And so
this is the one that was 13 years older than you.
Yeah. So that was the one that's 13 years older than me. He was kind of done with the Marines.
30s.
Yeah. And he was just struggling with that. And my mom was like, look, you can come, but we don't have room for you. So you're just going to need to figure it out when you come over here, I guess. And so I stayed. I had a makeshift bedroom in the corner of the second living room. That was like my little corner. And it's even funny because like my fiance was like, dude, like, why'd you live in a corner? Like, that's lame. Like, they couldn't have made both your brothers share a room and you get one of the other rooms. But anyways, so I moved back and I was just like, I'll just do online. But I just had all this anxiety. Like, it felt like I was back in high school again. Like, I was trapped in this home. Yeah. And I was like, I cannot do online. I don't want to do this. Nobody else is doing anything. Like, everybody is not working. I was like, you know what? I'm quitting too. And so I just spent like majority of 2020, like the beginning half, just lost. I met my fiance in February of 2020. So about a month and a half before I quit school and COVID happened. And she lived in Portland but moved to Salem, and I was in Salem and moved to Portland. So we swapped places, but she would come up and see me. And so I was like doing good. And then I came back because of COVID and everything. And it was just hard because it was like, we want to be safe, social distancing. I know we just started dating, but like we don't know what's going on. Mm-hmm. So I was literally just isolated in home. And so I was just playing video games and smoking weed. And I was just like, I'm not even going to work. There's nothing to do. And then like May was coming around and my parents like, you need to get a job. You need to do something. And I was like, well, where am I going to work? Like there's like no options. Yeah. And so I was working at Little Caesars, and then I went through, there's this Dutch Bros right off of Lancaster by Winco. And I just would bring them pizza after my shift because I was like, there's free pizza. It's on the way home. Yeah. And so then one of them was like, do you want a job? And I was like, what? I was like, I already have a job though. They're like, no, do you want a job here? And I was like, I mean, yeah, I love Dutch Bros, of course. They're like, well, take this application, fill it out. Like, you're so nice. I feel like you'd be perfect. Man. And so then I got hired there. And I kind of feel like this was the first moment of like that missing piece. Mm-hmm. Dutch Bros did a good job, and they always do a good job of making you feel like you belong. And so I got my job in 2020 in May. We were masked up. I was working, and they taught me what it was to serve. Like, you have to serve the customer. You have to make their day better than it was before they came here.
That's right.
And so even though I don't think they're built on Christian faith, I feel like I just was experiencing another way through the spirit of like service. I experienced love, and now I'm experiencing service. And I just was like, at this time, I still wasn't going to church. My parents were like, if you're going to live with us, you have to go to church. And I was like, well, I'm not going. You can't make me. And so I just was like, I didn't have Christ during all of that. And the beginning of my relationship with my fiance wasn't great either. And I think that, we weren't rooted in Christ. Yeah. And so during 2020, I eventually moved out. I just was like, I can't talk to you guys. You guys are driving me insane. And so I moved in actually with my fiance and her family. We had only been dating for a couple months, and she knew my family situation like pretty well. And she's like, yeah, just like, I'll ask my dad, like, if you can come stay with us for a little while. And thankfully enough, he opened his home to me, and I stayed with them, was building that relationship. And then she's a believer. And so she
was already a believer.
Yeah, she was already a believer, was already going to church, reading her Bible. And so she was like, I know you've been to church before. Like, do you want to go to church? And I was like, I don't really do the church thing anymore. Like, I'll read the Bible if you want, but like, I don't really go to church anymore. I don't have a church I go to. And I was like, I don't know Spanish. Like, your church is in Spanish. And so she was like, well, we could watch like a church video at least. Or I was like, okay, like, I'm down. And so it's like, she reintroduced me back into that, and we started feeding that seed. But I think because I was just struggling identity so much, and come Christmas of 2020, so she has asthma, so she was at risk already with COVID. She was like, look, if you're going to stay here, you only have to make one promise that you're not going to go out partying and do all these things with people. Like, you're going to like be here with us. Yeah. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's easy enough. I don't do anything anyways. And my parents, though, they didn't believe in COVID. They literally were like, it's fake. Don't believe that. Like, it's so fake. Yeah. And so they were out doing whatever they wanted. And Christmas came. They're like, are you coming home for Christmas? I was like, well, here's the thing, like, my girlfriend's at risk and you guys have been going out. I don't think that's a good idea, but I'll do it over FaceTime. Yeah. And they were like, are you serious right now? Like, you're not even going to come for Christmas? That doesn't even compel you enough to come see your family? I was like, not really. And they were like, there was just a big fight. And so they were like, come get your gifts. I was like, okay. And so I show up, I brought my girlfriend with me, and they literally threw my gifts at me in the street. Like, I was opening the door. They're like, because of you, like, this family's falling apart. And they're just like shoving their gifts at the door. They're like, take your gifts. Merry Christmas. Like, hope you're happy with the decision you made. And I was just like,
I don't want them.
I don't even want these, bro. And so I went back home, and in that moment, I talked to my girlfriend. I was like, honestly, I think I'm going to cut them off. I was like, I'm blocking them. I was like, I'm not talking to them anymore. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, I can't do this anymore. And that was like bottom, like, my mental health was in the tank during 2020. I was on and off my medications, didn't really have a future, and was just like, I'm quit college. I quit everything. And so in that moment, like, I didn't know it, but I think God was really just stripping me of all the fake kingdoms I built for myself.
He does that really well.
Yeah, he really does.
Been there, yeah.
Yeah. And so I got my own apartment by the end of that year. It was the first time I was like, wow, I'm so like proud of myself. Like I barely 20, got my first apartment.
Yeah.
And so I was working at Dutch Bros and I didn't have a car at the time. And so I was just riding the bus everywhere and I saved up enough. My credit was good. And I think I'd got my first car in like, it was like April or March of 2021. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, life is good. Like, you know, I'm out here, I'm surviving, but I still was like that lukewarm Christian. Like I would, you know, I'd watch my church video with Raquel and then I would just be like, okay, life's good. That's it. That's all I need to do. Check that box. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was serving at Dutch Bros. I was like, well, I don't know. I was like, I'm pretty sure this is what being a Christian's like. Like I'm loving the people at my job and I'm positive. And so then it was March 2021. I just got my car and I was door dashing and I was kind of just like in and out of like job. I was like, I don't really want Dutch Bros. I really do want Dutch Bros. And then it was November of 2021. So Dutch Bros, we were in an armed robbery. And so it was the one off Lancaster. And it was crazy because nothing like this had ever happened in the history of Dutch Bros. And so I was closing, I was a shift lead. So I was doing really good at work. I was getting promoted. And I think 4 or 5 guys rolled up with shotguns and they just like basically were in the windows and in the door and were like, give us like all the money you have. And I was just like, in my mind, because I'm a shift lead, I knew I had already dumped the money in the safe, which was in the warehouse. So I was like, there's no money in this shop. And I was like, I'm not about to get shot though for $20 because there literally was like $20 in the register. So I was like, okay, look, here's the money in the register. And I was like, in the back of the stand, I was like, there's the till bags, like the bags that the runners have. I was like, there's money in there. There's way more money in there. Just take those. Like, that's all you need. That's all we have. I swear I don't have anything else. And so they took that, they ran off with that. And thankfully nobody got hurt like physically, but it was just like, I was just like awestruck. I was like, I have no idea what just happened. Like that was actually insane. And to think too, my girlfriend that I was with at the time was literally 4 houses away when this happened because we lived right around the corner from my work. And it just was like, oh my gosh, like what happened? And so I told Dutch Bros like, hey, like I'm just really struggling. And all of them were like, anybody who was involved with this, like take as much time as you need. We'll pay you for it. Like you can come back when you're ready. And so I believed in them and that. And I was like, okay. And so I took like 2 months off. But then I got my paycheck and it was like really small. And I was like, hey, like, I just want to know, like my paycheck's really small. I wasn't sure. They're like, oh yeah, like, we gave you guys paid 2 weeks off.
Oh, 2 weeks.
I was like, 2 weeks? What do you mean? I was told like it was going to be any amount of time. They were like, no, like it was 2 weeks. And I was like, they're like, but you were welcome to come back whenever you wanted. We weren't gonna.
Yeah.
I was like, what? I was like, if I had known it was 2 weeks, I would have like pulled it together sooner. So then I was like, you know what? I'm quitting. I was like, I'm not doing this, bro. I'm not going to be here and you guys only pay me 2 weeks. Like I was so infuriated. And so I just like, I'm just going to DoorDash. That's all I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And my aunt at the time was a real estate agent down in California. She was like, hey, like, how are you doing? You know, I just saw on the news, you know, some crazy stuff happened. Are you okay? I was like, yeah. She's like, have you thought about getting a real estate license? I was like, no. Like, why would, I was like, I don't even have money for that. I don't even think I would be good at a realtor. She's like, I promise you, it's not as hard as you think it is. She's like, you should just consider it. So that like that seed got planted. And then, so this was the end of 2021 going to 2022. And I was like, it was January. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to just get my real estate license. I have nothing better going for me right now. And so I enrolled in Chemeketa, and thankfully, like, I told my parents, I was like, look, I don't have money for this. And they're like, we have a college fund. And because it was through Chemeketa, it worked. And so they paid for that, thankfully. And I think they were just ready to see me like do something better. Yeah. Even though I hadn't really talked to them. And so I was door dashing full time and I was doing my real estate license. It was January. I finished up school in March of 2022, took my test, and then I passed, got all my stuff. And I was like, all right, it's time to make some money. Yeah. And in my head, I was like, you know, I'm gonna like be rich. I'm gonna be making all this money and stuff. And I really I like believe that wholeheartedly. And I guess rewind, sorry. After the robbery, I was like in the tank, and this December is when I like gave my life to Christ.
Yeah.
I decided I was like, you know what, like I'm just gonna commit suicide. I was like, there's nothing here for me. I was like, I have no job, I have nothing. This is it. I don't even have love in my life. I hate all of this. And so I tried to take my life, and my roommates that I lived with at the time called my fiance and were like, hey, like RJ is usually like answering. It's like 7 o'clock. He doesn't really go to bed, but he's not answering. His door's locked. I don't know, like, is he okay? And my girl at the time was like, well, I'll try to call him. He usually answers. And like I wasn't answering, obviously, because passed out. And they called the ambulance. And so like I basically overdosed. Was in and out of like consciousness. And the ambulance, they took me to the hospital. And I was in and out of consciousness that night. And thankfully, like my girlfriend now, she was there the whole time, and she even had to be there. And there was at one point where I was unconscious. Like I was unconscious. And I remember it was like all dark, and I was like walking just like down this path. And it was like a barely dimly lit path, but just like nothing else around me. And then all of a sudden I was just like weeping, and like Jesus like was walking next to me and was like, hey, like, why are you trying to come home? Basically, it was like what he was saying. I was like, I just don't belong. I don't have love. I don't belong. And he was telling me, like, you know, every time you touch your heart, like, know that, like, you do have love. I'm with you wherever you go. And that my love is greater than any love on this earth. You don't need your parents' love. You don't even need your girlfriend's love. You don't need anybody but me. And he basically was like, the mission I have set out before you has not been fulfilled yet. So it's not your time to come home. And
Amen.
I was just like, dang, okay. And he was like, just make me one promise, you know, like, that you won't try to come home before your time is called. You know, like I have greater things for you. It's like all you have to do is stop hurting yourself, because you're hurting me too. Like I feel the pain that you're going through. And I was just like, okay, like I won't anymore then, you know, like I'll give my life to you. Like I'm tired of hurting and tired of this. And then it just like I woke up. And the doctor was like, they were doing like chest compressions, and he was like, oh, thank God, like you're alive, like you stopped breathing. And he was like, I was afraid we were going to lose you. It's like a miracle, like you're here. And I was like, really? Like I felt like I just like fell asleep, you know? And he's like, no, like you were like not breathing for a good like couple minutes. Like it was scary. And so in that moment, I didn't immediately tell my fiance like what had just happened. I was just like, you know what? I need to change my life. And so that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to get my real estate license. And I was door dashing full time. And I was listening the whole time I was door dashing. I was listening to Elevation Worship and Elevation Church. Yeah. And I was just pumping my head with the fruit of him. Like I was like, I just need to like actually be devoted. And so even though it wasn't like traditional church, I started praying every time. And I was like, I want you to change my life. And I really feel like that was like, I was being watered. And so I finished, got my real estate license, was ready to go. And I was like, okay, like I took a bite of the humble pie. Like I have nothing. I'm just going to have to, you know, build myself from the ground up. But I got faith that God, you know, this is what he wants from me. This is what I'm going to do. And so I was in real estate for a couple months. I didn't sell a house the first time around, but then July of 2022, so I'd been in real estate for like maybe 2.5 months at this point. I was driving DoorDash, and somebody ran the red light downtown and T-boned me and totaled my car. No. Thankfully, I mean, by the grace of God, I walked away without a scratch, but I have a picture too. I have all the airbags deployed, and my passenger window was down too, and I didn't have a seatbelt on, and the cop was like, I don't know how you're alive, because you should have flown out that passenger window and like pretty much hit the ground and been dead. And I was like, yeah, I don't know either, but I'm here. And so I now just lost my car though, but I was door dashing full time.
That's your income.
Yeah. And the insurance, because I was young, I'd never been in a car accident like that before. They pretty much screwed me over, and like kind of like I feel like I got pretty manipulated because I didn't know what was going on, and I was dumb, and I kept saying that like I've never done this before. I don't know what to do. And so of course they're taking that as okay, so if he's never done this, he won't know this, and this. And so instead of, because they had told me they were going to pay me for every day I'd lost because it was my income. they were like, yeah, we can't actually do that. So we're going to pay you for what the car was worth, which is 12 grand. And my loan was like, I think 12 grand and $100.
Wow.
So I broke even and had to pay $100 pretty much, but I had nothing left. And I was like, crap. So I had to call Dutch Bros like one more time and was like, hey, look, I'm really trying to turn my life around. I'm not where I was 6 months ago, but this just happened and I need a job. I live in West Salem. I don't have a car. I just don't know if there's any positions. And they're like, actually, yeah, there's an opening at West Salem Dutch Bros. We'll send you there. I was like, perfect. So I got a job there and was doing real estate at the same time. And so I was closing and I was doing real estate during the day. And so I was kind of burning the candlestick at both ends and was getting really burnt, and I hadn't sold anything. And I just was like not learning anything. And I was like, you know what, like real estate, it's not for me. I think I'm just not a good realtor. Maybe this wasn't what God wanted. Maybe he just needed to pull me out of whatever. And so, and I was reluctant to pray about it. And I just was like, I'm quitting. And so I quit and I went back. I was at, I'm just do Dutch Bros. I'm loving it. I love the people here. And so I kind of just rolled my sleeves up and dove into Dutch Bros, worked my way all the way up to the assistant manager role. And I totally thought like I was going to be the manager. And so I'd been at the West Dutch for like another year and a half before I left. And so it was like the best time of my life. I was having so much fun. And then my manager at the time, this was March of 2024. He was like, hey, I just want to let you guys know I've been at Dutch Bros for 8 years, but I'm graduating in 3 months. I'm going to be leaving. And it's not rare, but it's once in a blue moon when a manager actually leaves, because they're so like, it's such a good company that if you are young, you can get paid really well. Yeah. And so when you're a manager, you like don't leave because there's no better job when you're 22 years old. And so that spreads like wildfire. Everyone's like, who's the new manager? Who's going to be the new manager? And I was kind of spoken to as if I was going to be the next option. And I was like, oh, perfect. Like, this is what I've been waiting for. I've been putting in the work. I feel like I know this shop inside out. I've been here for a year and a half. I've helped hire people. Like, this is like my time to shine. And so then I think it was towards the end of March, we were having our last stand outing with our manager. Or no, it was end of February. And he was like, I'm bringing in your new manager. But he never told me like who it was. So I was like, oh, it's a surprise. I was like, it must be me. Cause like,
it must be, yeah.
And he brought in this other guy, and I was like, who is this guy? And I was like, this is our manager. And so then I got a call later from the regional saying, hey, like, I know you obviously realize you're not the manager. It was a tough decision, but it was really a decision they said it was a decision off tenure. I don't know if that's the truth, but I kind of was just like, well, I know he's never worked at West, but like, I know this shop inside out. I've made improvements to make it a good shop, to keep the flow going. To like, the biggest problem is traffic on Wallace. I fixed that solution. Like, I just want to know what made me not qualified. And they said it wasn't that you weren't qualified. It just was timing. And I was like, okay, that's kind of like a BS answer. And I was like, whatever. Yeah, totally. I'll respect him. You know, he's my new manager. And I kind of just was like so frustrated. I was like, you know what, actually, like, no, I'm not training the new manager as the assistant manager. I was like, I'm stepping down. I'm going to enjoy being a barista. I don't need this leadership anymore. And so I stepped down and was like, that was my sign that I need to look for better in my life. And I was like, I feel like I was looking back on, you know, my dad getting laid off. I was like, yeah, I'm not about to sell my soul 10 years to a company who just brought in somebody who's never worked at the stand before. So I was like, okay, yeah, that's fine. But by the way, I'm not going to be the assistant manager anymore. I'm stepping down. And they were like, what? I was like, yeah, like I want to do something better with my life. And I just want to enjoy Dutch Bros. And so I stepped down and I joined. I was thinking about going direct to real estate, but I was like, nah, like that's not ready yet. Like I need to wait for real estate because that's a long time thing. Like I want to make sure I'm ready to go back. And so I was just really struggling with career identity. I'd already kind of solidified like who I was. I was like, I know I'm a believer in Christ. That's who I am. And then it just was like career identity was another entirely different piece. And I was like, okay, so I joined this cleaning company business building program. I was like, you know, I've never built a business. Let me just pay this whatever fee it is, and I'll learn how to build a business. And so through that, prior to that, I'd won some money from a legal lawsuit.
Yeah.
And so I had some extra cash to spend, and I spent it and invested it in this cleaning company program. I was learning to build a business, and I built up this cleaning business throughout the time I was working at Dutch.
Yeah.
And so then it was like June rolled around, and I was like, okay, I'm actually making almost more money doing this than Dutch Bros. And Dutch Bros is kind of hindering me at this point.
Yeah.
And so I was like, do I quit Dutch Bros and just dive in? And I was just like, I know last time I did that, it went bad. So I was like, okay, you know what? Let's wait till we make this amount of money, and then we'll quit, and then we'll do that.
Right.
But I told them, yeah, go ahead.
So we're going to wrap up here.
Oh, shoot, sorry.
I think that's okay. This is great. What I want to do with you is I want to do another one down the road, because I think you got to unpack a lot of stuff, and this is good. But I think there's part 2 that we're going to unpack, because I want to get to X marks the spot, real estate, Dutch Bros. I want you to have time to unpack all that.
Yeah.
And so we're going to do another podcast.
Sweet.
And so, but let's wrap up on this here today.
Yeah.
And let people absorb this here. And then in usually what I'll do is wait about 6 months. I'm going to let you get your feet. We're going to come back and we're going to pick up where we left off. Okay. And we're going to do one more.
Perfect. That's cool. That sounds awesome.
Well, hey, we want to wrap up here with you today. Thanks for listening. RJ, thanks for being here.
Of course.
We love hearing the story. And by the way, we all experience pain in life. That's part of life. But I told you I'm going to wrap up on Romans Road. And here's what it says. We know that we've all sinned and fall short of the glory of God. We know that. That's Romans 3:23. Romans 6:23 says, for the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord. And then Romans 5:8 says, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this, while we were sinners, Christ died for us. So we know our state, and we know Christ is the one that died for us. So how do you know you're saved? Well, so here's Romans 10:9 and 10. It says, if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is by believing in your heart that you are justified, and by declaring with your mouth that you're saved. So, and then it ends with Romans 10:13. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. So there's your answer. Just like RJ talked about today, is knowing about God is one thing, or Jesus, but accepting him in your heart is another. So RJ, thanks for being here today. Thanks for sharing your story of faith. We're going to do part 2 and unpack a little bit more, but man, we really appreciate you being here and being really transparent.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, we're going to do it again, man. So thank you. Thank you. We'd love to have you subscribe to our channel, give us a review, share this podcast with someone. And again, we're going to be here to encourage and inspire people. So thank you very much. We'll see you next week.